Welcome into your PFF Draft Review, powered by PFF Edge and Elite. Today it's all about the Cincinnati Bengals, Sam, and they go with Billy Price in their first-round pick, center out of Ohio State. I can't help but wonder if they truly wanted Frank Ragnow, who went one pick earlier. He was our top center in the draft. We thought he was the clear top center in the draft. The Detroit Lions take him just one pick ahead of Billy Price. Was this one of those situations where they're just looking for a center and they're just going to take the best one available?
I know that was your theory all the way. As soon as it happened, you were saying this sounded like a panic pick, that as soon as Ragnow was off the board, they just grabbed the next guy on the list. But it sounds like, at least, they wanted Billy Price all along. He was the guy they targeted. Admittedly, they would say that after they drafted him. But still, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Say that they did want Billy Price. He's coming off a pretty good grade, 83.8. But it's all in run blocking. His pass blocking was not that good. But top centers in the NFL are like that as well. If you look at how his grades compare with a guy like Jason Kelsey. Jason Kelsey was our #1 graded in the National Football League last season, 95.1 overall grade. But his pass blocking grade was actually, poor. It was 61.9. That's not a good number. Billy Price is at least the same kind of idea, although not as extreme at either end. His run blocking grade was 84.7, the pass blocking grade 67.2. He gave up 13 total pressures, but they're getting a guy that is a much more accomplished run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And for that team, I think they're okay with that, given what they've had at the position over the previous few years.
And what they've had is Russell Bodine, who has moved on. He's had two out of the last 3 years grading in the 40s on our 0 to 100 scale. Yeah. So we're talking about this Bengals offensive line that has started to, as we like to say, creep back toward average, Sam, because they were very bad last year. And when you add the move to get Cordy Glenn at left tackle, that was one of the better moves, I'd say, this offseason to kind of solidify that left tackle spot, allow them to attack a few other areas. And Billy Price, he's a solid player to at least put in there and probably an upgrade over Bodine. So they're getting better across the board, I think, which is the most important thing, because the rest of that roster starting to come together. The offensive line was the big thing that held them back last year.
And on paper, heading into last year, it looked like a train wreck. It was a terrible looking unit on paper, particularly at the tackle spot. It manifested itself as soon as the season began. They ended up changing the offense to try and mitigate those problems. They are definitely adding players to try and bolster that unit and heading at least in the right direction, both in free agency and the draft. So I think it's a good move.
Billy Price was number 6 in the draft class in run block success percentage, 92%. That's all in the PFF Draft Guide, all part of PFF Edge and Elite. Second round pick was Jesse Bates, the safety out of Wake Forest. He was one of those difficult evaluations for me, Sam, because the high-end plays were there. He's a safety that can actually match up with wide receivers when they get lined up in those quarter schemes, and you have to play one-on-one with a receiver. Almost every safety loses those battles, but Bates had all sorts of just flash plays and pass breakups on film that you just don't see from a lot of safeties, but he still left far too many plays on the table, 16 missed tackles last year, so still some question marks there, but I love his high-end play.
Yeah, big question marks. That overall grade of 78.3 is not amazing. This next group of guys they drafted 11 players, by the way. This was one of the most voluminous drafts that we got. A lot of guys being brought in. Jesse Bates, Sam Hubbard out of Ohio State, Malik Jefferson out of Texas, the linebacker. There were a few guys that kind of were interesting evaluations. Either had one really big calling card, but some question marks. I think all those guys kind of fit that bill. Sam Hubbard was never that dominant an edge rusher, but actually flashed some impressive athleticism with the workout numbers that we weren't necessarily expecting to see from him, which again kind of raised some questions about his whole evaluation. And then Malik Jefferson, the linebacker out of Texas, former 5-star recruit, former #1 linebacker recruit in the entire nation, but 2017 was really the first year that we even began to see that kind of player on tape, an 87.5 overall grade, and finally started to see the impact plays that he could make, particularly in the run game. His average yards per tackle was just 3.3 yards, the 7th best among draft-eligible linebackers, and you could at least see last year why he was such an attractive high school recruit. And this is at a position of real need for the Bengals. They've been kind of patching up that linebacker core for years. Maybe Jefferson is the guy that can change that.
At least in the run game, as you mentioned, though. There's still some questions in coverage, and you can see the explosiveness on the field with Jefferson. He looked like the 5-star recruit when he had that straight line at the quarterback when he's rushing the passer, or, meeting the running back in the hole. Still have some question marks about his general awareness on the field, a few too many missed tackles through the years. They got another 5-star, former 5-star as well, Andrew Brown out of Virginia, another guy that in the 5th round, with such a weak interior pass rushing group, he's a pretty good player to at least take a shot on. Never really lived up, I don't think, to all of the hype at Virginia, but a better pass rusher than he was against the run, and he had some high-end plays on film as well. I got my boy Mark Walton in the 4th round. He got some Dion Lewis-type cuts on film, but he had his season cut short last year. And a guy that I think can step right into the running back rotation, catch some passes out of the backfield, and make things happen in the open field. It feels like between Malik Jefferson, Sam Hubbard, Mark Walton, Andrew Brown, a lot of guys that can at least contribute snaps as part of a rotation. And we talk about this Bengals roster and where they're strong in a lot of areas, these guys are adding some really good depth.
Yeah, and in the lower rounds, I think they got a couple of guys that we like. I'll let you talk about your quarterback in a minute, Steve. But the guy I really want to highlight is Darius Phillips. They got in the 5th round, cornerback out of Western Michigan. What's really interesting about him is he had 4 solid seasons of PFF grading, which is always a nice thing to have. But one of those seasons was at a completely different position. He started off at Western Michigan as a wideout and wasn't a bad one. Then 3 solid seasons of PFF grading in the 80s at cornerback, 84.5 in 2015, 81.4 in 2016, and 84.2 this most recent season in 2017. Because he's not this spectacular athlete, I think he's a guy that gets overlooked a little bit. But he had some interesting numbers and looked like he could be a player down the line.
He had an absolute dominant game against USC too earlier in the year. And then you mentioned my quarterback. It's Logan, Woodside, 7th round pick. I keep begging NFL teams, right? Don't just take the big-armed guy that has no clue where it's going. Take the little guy like Logan Woodside, who's got some accuracy, number 5 in the draft class in adjusted completion percentage, number 11 in big-time throw percentage. He's got some special throws in his arsenal. Just has to cut back on some of those boneheaded decisions. It doesn't really have a great big cannon for an arm, but a couple good years of production, and the PFF draft guide breaks it down extremely well. He was very good in some important areas, including the number 8 grade from a clean pocket, which we know is one of those more predictive numbers. So when you're taking those late chances on quarterbacks, we talked about this with Mike White going to the Dallas Cowboys, take guys that just grade well and show well in important areas, and that's Logan Woodside.
But also that big-time throw percentage is interesting because when you're looking for the guy with the cannon of an arm, you're only looking for that because of the big-time throws he can make with that cannon of an arm. If you've got a guy who's already making the big-time throws, who cares whether he's got a howitzer or not? If he can make the throws, he can make the throws.
Yeah, and there was a lot of good ones on film, even against Miami, who had a really good defense last year. Throw in Auden Tate in the 7th round, one of those big possession receivers who could do some damage in the red zone. It was certainly voluminous in this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals, adding all sorts of depth in their starting center in the 1st round. That's your Cincinnati Bengals PFF Draft Review, powered by PFF Edge and Elite.